Hi everyone, I'm Nat and I am the Director of Engagement at Forbes Ignite. For those of you who aren't aware, Forbes Ignite is an innovation coalition. It is the creative community of Forbes. We are a licensed partner and we work with some of the brightest, most innovative individuals around the world, from 12-year-old prodigies all the way up to your grandpa who is changing the way the world works for the better. We are really interested in all areas, from how we can use cooking to change the world, to artificial intelligence, all the way to mapping misogyny and how we can break down those stigmas. But today we are going to finish the last in our series on artificial intelligence, aimed at social entrepreneurs and how we can make a sustainable future for everyone. So with that nice introduction, let's get cracking. So yes, AI for sustainable business models. Hopefully you have an idea of what we mean, but if not, we are going to be defining the basics today. It's going to be scratching the surface, but hopefully in a little bit more detail than maybe what you've already had to date. All of the content today and our previous sessions are based on the soon-to-be global bestseller, What's Your AI Strategy by Will and Nicole, who I mentioned previously. This is a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about AI and management. How can AI be embedded into the culture of your organization, not just an additional extra? What a lot of organizations have done is they've got their business model tried and tested. They haven't really updated it, and they'll do AI as a bit of an add-on. But the thing about that is, because it's not baked into the product, it tends to die out and fizzle out very quickly. So what we're proposing is, let's go back to basics. Let's rip up the business plan that you normally have and build it with AI at the heart of it. So this is what this book is all about. So with that, what are we going to explore? It's only an hour, I'll do my best, but we're going to be looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN's initiative on how to save the planet. And that will feed into what we're talking about today. When we're talking about sustainability, we're meaning in the short term. So how can we make sure your business keeps on going? But also in the long term, how can we make sure that the planet keeps going? So that word is going to have a double meaning today. We're going to be looking at big data. You know, we've heard big data, big tech, but what does it really mean? And how it links into artificial intelligence. We're going to look at some case studies. How is it already being implemented? In a previous workshop, we spoke a lot about how AI is being used by social entrepreneurs. But this session is going to be looking at a little bit more about how corporates are using it in conjunction with social entrepreneurs, so kind of partnerships. Because ultimately, AI is only as good as the data you feed into it, and the data is owned by the big guys. So we're going to have to collaborate if we want to make these implementations. Then we're going to look at some sustainable models, some existing ones, and then lastly, finish off with some recommendations and some quick Q&As. So Business Model 101. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but quickly, what are we even talking about when we refer to a business model, like the old outdated one? Essentially, it's a strategy. How is an organization, what is it creating? What is delivering? What does it hope the value is? Why would you have one? Well, it helps develop companies, attract investment, recruit talent, motivate staff to know there's a cause of what they're up to. But as you'll notice in this brief definition, which I got from Wikipedia, credible source, it doesn't mention the word sustainability at all. At no point does it mention sustainability, and AI isn't included in it because, well, AI is too new apparently, but it needs to be. So the issue is that AI is not normally taken into consideration when it is. It is not sustainable for the business or the planet. This is why today we're going to rip up this definition and start again. Even if you've got a business and it's already succeeding, you know, hopefully the pandemic has taught you a lesson that no model is evergreen. Everything will go through challenges, and this kind of reimagining business models might allow you to stay on your own 2 feet a little longer. So Sustainable Development Goals. Essentially, Sustainable Development Goals was the United Nations. They all got together and it's like, we are destroying this planet. Maybe if we came up with, say, 17 goals, we could fix it. But we've got till 2030, so not that long. They are flawed, I'm not going to lie, but they're probably the best option we have at the moment to all get behind. All of our businesses should be aligned with the goals. Put a little pin on the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, that you believe is the most vital for sustainable growth. Which ones do we need to really focus on if we want our business to grow into the future, even with the likes of climate change affecting us. So I can see we've got responsible consumption and production, nice. Climate action for a few of you. We've got sustainable cities and communities. I think we can argue they're kind of all important and they all really feed into each other. There isn't a right or wrong answer. For me, I would probably say partnership for the goals. Or we've also got someone who says no poverty, nice. We've also got decent working and economic growth, very relevant. We're only individuals or even groups of individuals. We can't tackle all of them. But what I always say is pick one, become an expert in it. And if we do that, we might stand a fighting chance. It's good that we're all on the same page, and when I refer to them in the future, we know what we're on about. Now for big data, great. So we know what a business model is, we know it's out of date, we know the sustainable development goals should be baked into our new model, but where does AI come into it? Well, AI is artificial intelligence. This is when we give the computer the data and it's able to work it out for us, really complex problems. Now, AI has amazing capabilities, though there is a real key issue. Where do we, the humble peasant of the tech world, where do we get our data from? So we're going to quickly address this before we move on to some case examples. But before I do that, how would you define big data? So write on the app, write on the chat, whatever works for you. Because I do find there's a lot of misconceptions about what we mean by big data. You'll also find that big data, AI and machine learning are often used interchangeably, but there is a difference. So we've got data, but larger. Yeah, I guess so. Think about it like the Internet of Things, essentially all the information in the world. We've got large-scale data sets that cannot be easily analysed by traditional computer methods. Very accurate. Analytics, yeah. Think like, there's so much data in life, like your body processing things, your computer ticking away, the lights that's flickering, the tides coming in and out, the trees growing, the oxygen in the atmosphere. Life is complex. There is so much data, and we can't process it all. Big data is like the accumulation. So we're normally referring to like places like Facebook, medical services, government, NASA, any organization that has access to large amounts of data which can help you predict or like post you in the right direction. Jeff says data equals device users. Yes, and that's another one. So every single one who has a phone is like a walking bit of data and that the big organizations can harvest. This definition, which we got from Gartner, is that high volume, high velocity, and high variety of information assets that demand cost-effective innovation forms of the information processing for enhanced insight and decision making. That's a big word. And an example of this is, say, a drone searching for someone lost in a forest. There's so much data. There's all the trees, there's the ground, there's the height, there's the width, there's what the person looks like. There's all this information being churned around in order to come up with a process which is far simpler than we would ever be able to do. Yes, we could fly over with a little helicopter, but that person's doomed. We're not finding them. So AI can really help us in this regard. And the more data it has, the more quality data, the more effective and efficient it will become. So now the next question, what data source do you currently have access to? Because remember, AI is great, but if we do not have access to data, the results may not be amazing. And there's so many examples of AI going to pot because the data wasn't exhaustive enough or up to date. So maybe you have a website and you have like thousands of visitors coming every day. Maybe you've got a store and you're always getting all the data of like, okay, how much people are spending on average, what is the average cost people are paying for. Maybe you've got a lot of data from marketing. So, okay, how many people are clicking your ads? How many people are seeing your posts? Social media data, how many likes do you have? How many subscribes? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, by the way. These are great amount of data, though the difficulty is it's not enough data. What you can do on your website, your data will be helpful. It will give you insights, but it isn't going to be enough for AI to do something meaningful with it. So if you are thinking right now, great, I'm a small business owner, social entrepreneur, I want to create a sustainable business model with AI at the heart of it, you're going to have to find someone to collaborate with. So here we are. Before I give you the key to this formula on how you can make a sustainable business model with AI, let's look at a few examples of how other organizations have been able to implement it. We've got this lovely quote from the chairman of Telefonica, O2 if you're in the UK, and he says, forging a relationship between our big data work for social good is fundamental. So big organizations like Telefonica who have all this data do actively want to work with us. And as you'll go on and realize, it isn't because it's the right thing to do. It's because it actually makes sense for them as a business. And that is the key thing to how you can make a business sustainable if you're supporting sustainability. So the first example is United Utilities. They were able to cut their prices with artificial intelligence and pass that cost saving on to their customers. Everyone was happy, and it was able to save water. Now, this is a prime example of a sustainable business model. It's not just, say, giving out money. Okay, we want to reduce water, but we're going to have to rise costs. That's not sustainable. Or lower costs. That's not sustainable either. So what they were able to do is use AI to generate all different sensors and work out where it was leaking, where the pipe was bursting, where it was faulty, when the pumps were pumping, rather than pumping at full pelt all the time, only do it when there was a demand and need. And this resulted in 22% energy saving, a really great use of win-win. And that is what we're going to be going for here. I'm sure all of you have read it, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you can, there's some good parts on it, not as good as What's Your AI Strategy. The next one is boat fuel efficiency with AI. So this example is the ferry firm Stena Line used artificial intelligence to find the most fuel efficient route by simulating paths for optimal fuel efficiencies. The goal is AI systems across its fleet of 38 this year. So what they'll do, they'll get all the data of all the different journeys, how long it takes, how much fuel is used, and each time they can adjust their journey just even so slightly. And over the course of a year, with 30 different 8 boats going multiple journeys, that adds up to a huge cost reduction and saving the planet. So another win-win. All of these solutions shouldn't come at a cost to the planet or the consumer. That's how you know it's a sustainable model. Next quick one is disease prevention. So a telephone company has developed a risk map in Pakistan to show the likely introduction of a dengue fever, it's like a little mosquito bite, from population mobility. So what they'll do, on the phones, you can tell where people are going and you can see how it would move around the country. So unlike this current pandemic, which let's say we bodged it up a little bit, we didn't stop people, we didn't notice it sooner, we're able to now look at future diseases or future parasites that are spreading and stop them before they get out of hand. And this is great because with all of these options, it's not the big data companies working on their own. They are not the experts. They just have the data. But then you've got your social enterprises, your NGOs, your governments that have the means and the knowledge to fix these problems, but they lack the data. So with all these options, yes, they're a win-win, but also they're a collaborative effort. And that is going to be another key thing we see time and time again. And a few more examples, just to wet your whistles, is Norway Air is currently cutting 16,000 tons of CO2 with artificial intelligence by looking at the route and judging the airflow. So they look at the data and think, okay, well, this airflow, this kind of pipe stream. Then in Brazil, another one by Telefonica is predicting air quality 40 hours in advance. So for instance, if they know a big smog cloud of bad air is coming through, they're able to evacuate people, they're able to put preventative measures in case. Then we've got another water company. They're harnessing power with AI storage. So they'll use the artificial intelligence to work out how much to store, when to store it. Finland is tracking travel patterns to improve transportation. They'll be able to see what roads need replacing, which ones are causing the most congestion, which traffic lights are more hassle than they're worth. In Cameroon, they're checking cell signals. I think this is with Orange. They shut down in the UK, but maybe they still exist other places. And what they do, from one signal to the other signal, you can measure how long it takes. And every time it rains, the signals take a little bit longer to get to where they need to. So they're able to see how much rainfall will impact the infrastructure. This is useful to the population because it can help understand potential flooding. So that's a win for the community. But it's also a win for the telecommunications company because they have better data on how to protect their mask and have a good service for their customers. So it really is great because it's, again, the people who want to help the world is winning and the companies who want to make money are winning. No one here is doing anyone a favor. It's very mutual. And last one, the UNPD in Sudan is collaborating with big data to ensure progress on anti-poverty. So even in countries that are still, struggling either from war or poverty, are still able to tap into the data, even if infrastructure isn't there. This picture on the left is a little GIF showing you a computer doing an algorithm to find out the best possible plan for new developments. So they take in consideration the air quality, the way that people maneuver the area, what buildings kind of block out sunlight. They're able to take all these different factors, which would just blow our minds up, to create the best possible living environment. So for social good in AI, what do we need? Well, we need customer privacy. People will only keep giving their data if they believe it's safe. So we cannot abuse it. If you get hold of this lovely data, look after it with your life. Then you've got accurate data. Great, you've got data, but is it any good? For example, the vast majority of people on Facebook are all dead. Not great data. And then we've got quality analysis. Great, you've got some good data here. You're getting all your contacts from TikTok, relevant. Not many people are dead on it. But if you're not analysing it well, it's not going to work. A good example here is this picture, and it's loads of faces, black faces. And the reason why this is relevant is that with different AI models, they're really good at doing facial tracking and recognition on white people because all their models are based on white faces. But when it comes to darker skin, they tend to make more mistakes. So not great data, and that equals bad results. Think about your company, your business, or your idea. Who owns or controls the data that you need to implement your idea? Maybe, you're wanting to help the water system, pollution, quality education, whatever sustainable development goal you thought, that's the one that I want to base my business around. Who owns the data? So is it big tech companies like Amazon, Facebook, Apple, all of those? Is it government? So maybe you need people's birth records or where they live or medical documents. Maybe it's just the individuals. No one else owns this information. You have to go to the people. Or lastly, it could be NGOs. Probably not them, as they probably has less information. Now, if you say knock on the door of Mark Zuckerberg's house, and he'll be like, oh, what you doing here? He's not going to give you the data unless you pay him a hefty price, and then he'll probably happily give it to you. But how can you honestly get this data? You can't just go to the government or big tech or individuals and say, do us a favor. There has to be a reason. It has to benefit them. Yes, you could pay for the data, but that's not sustainable. You can't just keep paying them. You have to come up with a partnership. So let's have a look at some of the potential partnerships we could do. So sustainable business models. This is what you came for. Let's give the people what they wanted. Well, on this section, all I want you to do is rank the features of a sustainable business model. So whichever one you think is the most important, put to number 1, and the least important, put to number 4. So far we've got a mutually beneficial agreement. Yep, that is a great one. What does your partner get from it? Then we've got a committed partnership. Really important. Say you have a relationship with Google and they're like, yeah, this benefits us too. But then in a few months' time, they're bored of your partnership and it fizzles out. Whoop, your plan goes to pot. And then we've got reliable funding source. Is this pot of gold going to continue or is it going to run out? And then last one, no time limit to funding. Sometimes you can say, oh, it's I don't know, Black History Month, so we're going to give you some money to combat anti-racism. But then when it stops being in fashion, what then? So if you were able to take all these things in consideration, and to be honest, they're all important, then that is a good foundation. So the 5 main business models, and there are others, but these are the ones that I looked at for thinking which ones could be sustainable. You've got your classic philanthropy. So you've got your Mr. Monopoly who's willing to give you some money, or in this instance, data. So let's say Amazon's willing to give you some data on consumer insights, and you're like, brilliant. The challenge with this, though, is there's a one-off. Bezos isn't going to keep giving it to you. Then we've got donor subsidized. So maybe like Bezos will half cover it, but you've still got to come up with the rest of the money. This is great because it's asking less of a favor from someone, and it's also showing that the idea can stand up on its own because you're able to like part fund it. But again, not so sustainable. Cross subsidized. Maybe you run like a social enterprise. So part of your business makes the money and the other part is for doing good in the world. And one funds the other part. Well, then we've got tried, sorry. And that is like, you know, testing. You've done your testing before, so you've been able to get paid for it. And commercial, which is the one which most people are aware of. And this is when you run a service and it is fully paid for by itself. So it is self-sustaining. These models are great, but they aren't all created equal. A good example is maybe you're trying to start a business and you want AI to be at the heart of it. Probably your best bet is philanthropy or a donor to begin with. But if you're already running an organization and it's doing okay, philanthropy is not a great one. You're probably better off going for the commercial. But there isn't, you know, we'll kind of get to that. On this section, I want to ask from you, because I've heard enough from my opinion, how sustainable do you think each of these models are? So for instance, if you think it's very sustainable, I think you whack it up to a 5 on your screen. If it's not sustainable, you put it to a 0. A lot of people think commercial is quite sustainable. I mean, I feel like I influenced this because I did kind of give you the answer, but even still, we got cross-subsidized, nice donor. I think this is actually quite an accurate representation of my own views and what I've been able to research. So we know that commercial is the most sustainable one, but we also know making money in a commercial sense, which is sustainable for the planet as well, is challenging. So sustainability, we're just going to look at a few examples, but on this one, I want you to ask yourself, how sustainable is the philanthropy model with AI? So if it's not sustainable, slide to the left. If it is sustainable, slide to the right, just like you would on Tinder. So funding, not time limited. Is philanthropy related to time? Maybe a long-term plan? Is it mutually beneficial? Do you need a committed partnership? Funding sources, are they clean and reliable? And are they internally prioritized? So is it important? And here we can see, interestingly, a lot of you think that the funding is not that sustainable in terms of the time limit. I would agree. You know, there are some funds which continue, but you never know. There's no guarantee. In terms of a long-term plan, I think they're quite, you know, those two are very similar. You can't say for certain. This is why so many charities are shutting down at the moment. Mutually beneficial. Well, maybe it's for tax purposes. Maybe the donations that you are receiving are part of the funder's corporate social responsibilities. So maybe. Then we've got commitment, partnerships. Yeah, I think, you know, philanthropy is a lot of it is about partnerships. Then is the funding source reliable? Interestingly, that a lot of you said it is, where I wouldn't be so sure. And internally prioritized. I don't know if giving people money is ever prioritized if you're not getting something in return. But I think, you know, it's open for debate. But ultimately, I would say that philanthropy is probably one of the least sustainable methods. The next one we're going to look at, and we only have time for 2 today, is the commercial one. And that's lucky that a lot of you think this is the one which is the most sustainable. So same questions as the last one. How does this one stack up in terms of how sustainable it is? So commercial, yeah, a little bit time limited, long-term plan, mutually beneficial, yeah, partnerships. See, this is interesting. On average, most of you are kind of going down the middle, but I think we could say it's more consistently higher. And the other ones are kind of like in between the two that we've just looked at. This is a good diagram, which I think shows you how sustainable, but also the impact each one could have. So we look at philanthropy here. smaller social impact. If someone's only got a set amount of money, it can only do so much good. Donor, cross, and commercial, and usually you see more here. So there's potentially more room to do good in the world if it's a commercial product. Now, we need to pick a model. Why is it time to pilot? Just having a good idea and going to a big data company and saying, hey, you know what? I've got an idea. Can you give me your data and I'll do the rest? Just like Donald Trump, no one's going to believe you. You need to have evidence. And this is why running a pilot is almost essential. There's pros and cons though. So first of all, you need to have a sample size. You might not have access to all the data in the world, but if you're able to replicate or, prototype what you want to do with a small amount of data, amazing. It allows you to know the relevance of data to your problem. How much data do you need and what data do you need access to for this to really work? You need to build trust. An organization which is reliant on the trust and faith of the people who use their services aren't going to let you have access to the data if you aren't trustworthy. Then to show social impact. This is another really great model to show there really is merit in it. And then to build interest, you need to get people excited. On the other hand though, running a model could show that your idea, it hasn't worked, or it could be very time costly. There's definitely negatives to running a pilot, but I would say it's probably your best bet in getting someone to be on your side. So here are some recommendations. And these ones are to implement a sustainable business model with AI for long-term growth. If you are thinking about how AI can work in your business, it has to be long-term. It can't just be something which is just for like a test, otherwise it's pointless. Then to run sustainability pilots. Does it work? Find out if it works first. There's been examples where companies have put millions of dollars into a project, and because they didn't do a pilot or research at the beginning, it completely failed. Then you want to find the economic value. This is really important. Even if you're trying to do good in the world, how is it going to make someone money? If you can make someone money, you know it's going to continue for long after. And the last one we put is that AI business model needs partners with shared values. For instance, if you go to Amazon and you do not agree with their values and they have the data, do not work with them. It's just not going to work out. And is it someone like, why are they doing it? I often work with organizations and you have to ask yourself, do they really believe in the values that I believe in? Or are they doing it just because it looks good? And sometimes it can be easy just to take the money and run, but that isn't going to last into the future. You need to really perfectly align. So Melinda says, project value prior to pilots. Nice. Verify with pilot. Another quote from Telefonica, because I guess I love them. Not really, just coincidence. Data philanthropy is very important to start the social good movement. In the long term, we expect progress to be much quicker if there are also commercial opportunities. So remember that. Getting philanthropy at the beginning of your journey, probably your best bet, get your foot in the door, and then afterwards it has to transition to a commercial opportunity. And when you are busy creating your plan and strategy, think about how it will change as you start to grow and develop and can prove proof of concept. Now that's kind of the most of today, and I really want to put it to you for questions, but if you kind of enjoyed this brief insight, and I really only touched the tip of the iceberg on this one, do check out What's Your AI Strategy. Can honestly recommend it. And it goes into, this is just like one chapter. And if you want a little bit more, we've got some of these other videos uploaded to our YouTube channel, but this is your best bet. If you do want to follow this discussion, like this is early days. Forbes Ignite is always looking for innovative individuals who have great ideas and just need maybe the network or the connections. We're really great at connecting individuals and making things come to life. I've been Nat. You can email me at nat@ForbesIgnite or just go to the admin one. We actually have a question, which is great. So if you are an NGO with social impact missions in mind, how would you vet the values of a large company or navigate your fear of your work or partnering being tainted? Do you know what, Shane? That's a really good question because, when you scratch the surface, all these big companies aren't great. So you can't always act with full integrity, but as long as you understand and it's not in direct confliction on what you're doing. I know at Forbes Ignite sometimes we looked at companies that just didn't align with our values, and it was quite painful to turn them down, but we ultimately had to do it because you're only as good as your reputation. And the second that kind of gets tainted or goes down because of another organization wasn't, a public scandal, then it doesn't work out. So I'd say on that, you can only do the best research you're able to. Do research online, find out any local controversies, speak to individuals who work in the companies if you're able to, and try not to rush into any big partnerships. This has to be mutually beneficial, so they need to want it as much as you do. Otherwise, you'll kind of be beholden to their whims as you want. Oh, and Lucy, thanks, I explained it really perfectly. I like you, Lucy. You can come back next time. Okay, and Andrew says, is big data essential for meaningful AI projects? What if I want to work just with my own first party data set? You can do, but it depends on the scale. The more data you have, the more accurate your model will be. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it depends on your idea. Typically, if you're looking to upscale, then you would want to get big data involved, but it really depends. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit frantic, a bit all over the place, but hopefully it allowed to give you some ideas on how this works and a starting point.